I never thought I'd see my 67-year-old father lying unconscious on our driveway, blood pooling beneath his head, all because of a trash can violation. Would you believe the look on Karen's face when I revealed I owned her home at the emergency HOA meeting? Let me take you back to how it all started. Dad was visiting to help with renovations while I recovered from knee surgery. Karen Matthews, our power-hungry HOA president, shoved him to the ground over a misplaced trash can. What she didn't know, she'd just assaulted the father of the man who secretly owned her home and half the neighborhood. Behind my quiet facade, I was actually a successful real estate investor who'd purchased 27 of the 50 homes in Maple Creek estates, including Karen's. I documented her reign of terror for years, waiting for the right moment. As I held Dad's hand in the hospital, listening to the doctor explain his concussion and 20 stitches, I made a decision. It was time to reveal who really held the power in Maple Creek Estates. It all started 3 years ago when Karen Matthews became HOA president. At first, her perfectionism seemed harmless, ensuring lawns were manicured and holiday decorations removed promptly. But power changed her. Soon, she was issuing violations for unapproved mailbox colors and excessive bird feeders. I watched from my home office window as she made Mrs. Peterson cry over a small memorial garden for her late husband. Section 12, paragraph 7, prohibits unauthorized plantings, Karen had said, completely unmoved by the widow's tears. The next day the garden was gone, and with it, a piece of Mrs. Peterson's heart. The Wilson family fought Karen for months over their daughter's wheelchair ramp. It doesn't match the approved color palette, Karen insisted, fining them $500 until they painted it an approved shade of gray. Meanwhile, her nephew's basketball hoop, explicitly forbidden in the bylaws, remained untouched. The Patels received weekly citations for their religious decorations, while Karen's friend Susan displayed identical violations without consequence. College student Amara Johnson was reported for suspicious behavior while simply jogging through her own neighborhood. Each incident worse than the last. During my recovery from knee surgery, Dad came to help with renovation projects I couldn't complete. At 67, he insisted on being useful despite my protests that he should be enjoying retirement. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, he'd say with a chuckle, showing up at dawn with coffee and donuts. That Tuesday morning, I was watching from the kitchen window as Dad carefully placed our trash bins at the curb, meticulously measuring. 12 inches between them, as per HOA rules. He was always respectful of regulations, no matter how absurd. That's when I spotted Karen, power walking down the sidewalk, clipboard clutched to her chest, her face already flushing with that particular shade of red that meant someone was about to get written up. Dad noticed her too and gave a friendly wave. "Good morning," he called with genuine cheerfulness. Karen didn't return the greeting. Instead, she pointed accusingly at our trash cans. "These are in violation of HOA guidelines," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Dad looked confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I thought they were placed correctly." Karen consulted her clipboard with narrowed eyes. "Your trash pickup isn't until tomorrow. Section 8, paragraph 4 clearly states that bins cannot be placed at the curb more than 24 hours before collection." "Oh, I apologize for the misunderstanding. I'll move them right away," Dad said, his shoulders slumping slightly. Most reasonable people would have appreciated his polite response, but Karen wasn't reasonable. "This is the third violation this month," she said, although it absolutely wasn't. We'd never received a single citation before. "There will be a $150 fine." Dad's eyes widened. "That seems excessive for an honest mistake. Perhaps we could—" Karen cut him off. "Rules are rules. If you can't follow them, maybe your son shouldn't live in this neighborhood." I could see Dad's patience wearing thin, but he remained respectful. I understand rules are important, but surely there's room for some understanding when someone makes an honest mistake. Karen stepped closer, invading Dad's personal space. Do you know how many excuses I hear every day? If I made exceptions, everyone would think they're special. Dad sighed and began to roll one of the bins back toward our garage. I'll move them now. No need for unpleasantness. What none of my neighbors knew was that 3 years ago, when property values temporarily dipped, I'd quietly started buying houses in our neighborhood as long-term investments. I operated through various LLCs and holding companies, keeping my identity hidden behind corporate paperwork and a property management company, including Karen's house, purchased when her divorce forced her to sell to pay legal fees. She'd been renting from me for years without knowing it. In fact, I owned 27 of the 50 homes in Maple Creek Estates, enough to control the HOA. But I'd stayed silent, watching from the shadows as Karen's reign of terror escalated. I'd been meticulously documenting her selective enforcement, financial mismanagement, and the ever-increasing fines that somehow never funded actual improvements. I was building a case, waiting for the right moment to act. I never imagined that moment would come because she assaulted my father over a trash can violation. What happened next still haunts my nightmares. Karen grabbed the trash bin, yanking it away from Dad. It's too late for that. The violation has been documented. When Dad gently tried to take back the bin, Karen completely lost control. She shoved him hard. My 67-year-old father, who'd had hip replacement surgery just last year, stumbled backward on our sloped driveway. I watched in horror as he lost his balance, arms windmilling before his head hit the concrete with a sickening crack. Was out the door in seconds, knee brace forgotten as I rushed to his side. He wasn't moving. Blood pooled beneath his head. "Dad! Dad!" I screamed, dropping to my knees beside him. Karen stood frozen, her face draining of color as reality sank in. I didn't. He was resisting. It was an accident. She stuttered, backing away. "Call an ambulance," I shouted, pressing trembling fingers to Dad's neck, desperately searching for a pulse. Neighbors poured from their homes. Mrs. Rodriguez rushed over with towels. Mr. Chen, a retired doctor, knelt beside us while I called 911. The ambulance arrived, in minutes that felt like hours. As paramedics loaded Dad into the ambulance, one asked what happened. Before I could answer, Karen stepped forward. He fell. It was an accident. The look I gave her could have melted steel. "She pushed him," I said clearly. "There are witnesses." Several neighbors nodded in confirmation. 3 hours later, I sat beside Dad's hospital bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Concussion. 20 stitches. Observation for 48 hours due to his age. My phone buzzed with neighbors offering help and sharing their own Karen horror stories. Each message strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about Dad anymore. This was about a neighborhood held hostage by a power-hungry tyrant who'd finally gone too far. I looked at Dad's bruised face, the bandages covering his stitches, the IV in his weathered hand. Something inside me hardened into diamond-like resolve. It was time to end Karen's reign of terror. Time to reveal who I really was. 3 days later, Dad was released from the hospital, still shaky but improving. Karen had been charged with assault, but she'd made bail and was telling everyone it was all a misunderstanding, that Dad had been aggressive and she'd merely defended herself. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for that evening. Karen had called it herself, likely hoping to control the narrative. "I should stay home," Dad said, as I helped him with his tie. "No," I insisted. "I want you there." Trust me, the community center was packed when we arrived. Neighbors who'd never bothered to attend meetings before had shown up, curious about the drama. Karen stood at the front in an expensive blue suit, flanked by board members who always rubber-stamped her decisions. Her confidence wavered slightly when she saw Dad, his head still bandaged, leaning heavily on his cane. "Let's bring this meeting to order," she announced, tapping her gavel. "We have some unfortunate business to discuss. There's been an incident that's been blown out of proportion." I stood up, interrupting her carefully crafted narrative. "An incident? You assaulted my elderly father over a trash can and left him bleeding on the ground." "That's not an incident, Karen. That's a crime." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's face flushed with anger. "You're out of order. If you can't behave civilly, you'll need to leave." I walked slowly to the front of the room, my knee still aching from my recent surgery. "Actually, Karen, you're out of order, and you have been for quite some time." I turned to face the crowd, many filming with their phones. For those who don't know me well, I'm Michael Reynolds. I've lived in Maple Creek for 5 years now, mostly keeping to myself. What you don't know is that I'm also the principal owner of MR Capital Investments. Several people gasped. Karen's smug expression faltered. "Why should we care about your business?" she scoffed, but uncertainty crept into her voice. I smiled. "Because, Karen, Mr. Capital Investments owns 27 homes in this neighborhood." The room went dead silent. "Including yours." Karen's face turned ghastly pale. That's impossible. I own my home." I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen before turning it toward the audience. "The Rodriguez house, the Chens, the Wilsons, and yes, 124 Maple Drive, your house, Karen." The projection screen behind me lit up with property records and deed transfers, all hiding behind corporate names and LLCs that traced back to me. "You've been renting from me for 3 years, ever since your divorce when you had to sell to pay legal fees." Karen gripped the podium, her knuckles white. "This is a trick, a lie. I've been watching you, Karen, documenting every abuse of power, every selective enforcement, every financial irregularity. Like the $50,000 allocated for playground equipment that never materialized, or the special assessment for security cameras purchased from your brother-in-law's company at triple the market rate." Gasps and whispers filled the room. Karen was shaking now, looking desperately at the other board members for support, but they were already distancing themselves, both figuratively and literally. "For 3 years I've watched you terrorize our neighbors, fining the Patels for their religious decorations while ignoring your friend Susan's identical violations, forcing the Williams family to tear down their son's basketball hoop while allowing one at your nephew's house, making Mrs. Peterson cry over her memorial garden while your own yard breaks at least 7 HOA regulations." I gestured to Dad, who sat quietly watching. "But assaulting my father, that was your last mistake." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "Effective immediately, I'm exercising my voting rights as the majority property owner. Karen Matthews is removed from the HOA board. A forensic audit will examine all HOA finances for the past 3 years, and every fine issued under Karen's leadership will be reviewed for fairness and potentially refunded." Karen finally found her voice. "You can't do this. The bylaws, I interrupted, state that property owners get 1 vote per property. I own more than half the neighborhood, Karen. Do the math." What followed was something I'll never forget. One by one, neighbors stood up and shared their Karen stories. Mrs. Rodriguez described being fined for speaking Spanish to her grandchildren by the community pool. "My family has lived in America for 4 generations, but Karen told me, English, only in common areas." Mr. Wilson recounted the wheelchair ramp battle that had cost them thousands. "My daughter just wanted to enter our home with dignity, but Karen called it an eyesore." College student Amara Johnson revealed she'd been reported for suspicious behavior while simply jogging through her own neighborhood. Karen called the police on me 3 times, in my own neighborhood. Each story was worse than the last, painting a clear picture of Karen's tyrannical reign. Through it all, Karen seemed to shrink, her imposing presence diminishing with each revelation. When she finally tried to leave, Officer Taylor was waiting. By the door, "Karen Matthews, you're under arrest for assault and battery." As they led her away, Dad slowly stood up, leaning on his cane. The room fell silent as he spoke for the first time. "I don't believe in revenge," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But I do believe in justice, and in treating people with dignity, no matter what rules they might have broken." The look of utter defeat on Karen's face as they escorted her out was something I'll never forget. In that moment, 3 years of unchecked power crumbled before our eyes, and our neighborhood began to breathe again. The changes came quickly after that. A new HOA board was elected, consisting of diverse neighbors who actually represented our community. The ridiculous rules were simplified, focusing on genuine property maintenance rather than controlling every aspect of homeowners' lives. The forensic audit revealed over $200,000 in misappropriated funds, which Karen and 2 board members were ordered to repay. Karen pleaded guilty to reduced charges, received probation, and moved out of state. Dad recovered fully and decided to move into the neighborhood permanently. He chairs the community garden committee now, teaching kids about growing vegetables, without a single citation or fine. I never told anyone else about the other properties I own. That was never the point. The point was creating a neighborhood where rules exist to help rather than control, and where a simple mistake with a trash can doesn't end with an ambulance. I keep a framed photo on my desk. Dad standing proudly in our community garden, surrounded by neighbors of all ages. Next to it sits a small reminder, a miniature trash can, because sometimes the smallest things can lead to the biggest changes. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. To hear more experiences of standing up to HOA bullies, share your stories in the comments below.